Hi everyone, welcome to this week's Desteni I Process live Google Hangout. I'm Christina and I'm your host for this week's Hangout, which is the last episode in our bullying series. The last 2 weeks we've been looking at bullying victims, people who have experienced themselves being bullied, and how they've gone through that and how they've supported them with the Desteni I process. And also we looked at cyberbullying. Today we want to close the series with understanding the mind of a bully. What makes someone, behave in a certain way that one could define as bullying? We want to understand, like, what's behind the nature of a bully. So with me in this discussion, we have two people. Josh, he is in Louisiana, yeah?
Yeah, New
We have
Orleans.
North American participants today, so that's great. But we have Josh here from Louisiana. Hey, Josh.
Hello.
And I have Gabrielle here from the East Coast and right outside Boston, Massachusetts. Hey, Garb.
Hello. How you doing?
Good. Glad you guys could join us. I think this is going to be a pretty interesting discussion. So for those that want to participate, or if you have questions or insights or experiences you want to share, you're more than welcome to in the Q&A section of the Google Plus event page. If you're watching from YouTube, just click on the link that says be a part of the discussion, and that will take you to the Google Plus page where you can share any insights or questions that you have. We'll be chatting for about 40 minutes, so keep that in mind and get those questions in. So yeah, like I said, we're going to talk about the mind of the bully, or the nature of the bullying and what creates a bully. But we're going to start with looking at first the definition of what is bullying, or what is the definition of the word bullying. And so I'm going to have Josh tell us about that. What is the definition of the bully, and what is your experience? Josh has been writing some blogs about this point specifically and has found some interesting things in the word bully itself. So Josh, do you want to share with us what you have found in looking at the definition and just your own process in looking at that word?
Sure. Yeah, I wrote a little bit about the word bully and investigated it a little bit, and so this is what I found. And so I'll start with the actual dictionary definition, and maybe we'll expand from there. And so the dictionary definition, basically, I mean, it depends on where you look, but basically it's somebody who's quarrelsome or blustering or overbearing, who habitually badgers and intimidates smaller or weaker people. And so that is the general definition of a bully. And then I investigated the word, the sounding of the word, and found some more interesting little pieces to this. And so I'll go ahead into that, I suppose. And so first,
hey Josh,
yeah.
really quick, just for those that obviously the three of us, we walk the Desteni I process, so we work with things such as writing and self-forgiveness and self-correction and breathing, and basically looking at investigating who we are as the mind and certain behaviors. But for anyone that doesn't know what sounding of a word means, can you just explain a little bit about that and how that process works, and how you did that with the bullying, just so they have some context?
Yeah, sure. So you just take any word, especially a word that you're investigating or maybe trying to get to know better, and you just simply sound it out. You break it up into different parts and sound out the different parts and see what other sounds that you can come up with that sound similar to maybe other words. So like, take a word and you break it down and you sound it out, and then maybe you're starting to discover that there's other words that are kind of linked to the word that you're investigating, and then those other words can kind of add like color or flavor to the overall and enrich the overall understanding of the word, actually. And it's kind of a surprising concept because it's not something you think of intuitively, but it does seem to work out pretty good. I mean, you could test it for yourself. Just take any word and sound it out and see what other words and sounds it sounds like, and see where that leads you.
And so you did that with the word bully, right? And tell us what you found.
Yeah, okay, so I did that with the word bully, and the first part was, the first sound that I got was boo, like scare, and lee sounds kind of like lie. And I actually got that right out of the dictionary, because on the sounding of the word in the dictionary, the first four letters were boo. And I was like, wow, that's interesting. So it's right there in the dictionary. that's the way it's supposed to be sounded out, actually, properly, is bully. And Lee sounds like lie. So to me, that resonated with, or that brought up the point of, a bully is basically scaring somebody with lies, because the whole, it's not actually an equal and one relationship that you're having with someone, or a physical reality that can be verified. It's just simply an intimidation factor, or overbearing, or badgering, or however you want to define it. And it's which is based on something that's really not actually a fact, and so you're scaring or intimidating people with lies. So I found that in the sounding of the word. And then there's actual, go on.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, all right. So I found a little bit more too. It's kind of exciting. I got excited about this one. So and then there's also boo, L-I, and so boo is, again, you're getting somebody to be afraid of you. You're scaring them. Boo, as the bully, right? The bully, and then L is actually the word of the gods back, like in, like, I don't know, 5,000 years ago, ancient Babylon. The god, or the superior beings, were referred to as El. And in modern language, L is used for like elevation, or to lift up. Okay. And so and then I, would that be self? So boo, I'm elevating myself. So I'm through my fear mongering as the bully, I'm elevating myself as the superior being. And of course, that's all a bunch of lies, because there's inferior or superior doesn't even exist, right? So that I pulled out of the word, the sounding of the word. And there's even more. This is a good word. I got to say, sometimes I go to sound out words and not much comes out, but this one had a lot in it. So, and then bull lie, and which is basically it's all bull, right? And then the last part of the sounding that I thought was interesting is be-lee. Bully sounds like be-lee, the word be-lee. And to be-lee is to contradict yourself with your actions, your words with your actions. When your words and your actions contradict, you're be-leeing yourself, or the word for that is to be-lee. And that's also fits into the definition, because it's not based on actual real facts. Like, for instance, if you have a conflict with somebody, or a disagreement, or you feel if you feel that you need to be superior, or you fear that you're inferior, I mean, that's kind of a separate topic, but if you sort that out, you can come to the realization that they don't actually exist. We're all made of the same substance, and we're all here on the earth, and we're all life. So within that context, we're all equal. And so there really isn't inferior or superior beings out there. So that if you have the feeling or the need to present or elevate yourself through lying and scaring and fear-mongering others, that's not based on anything that's actually real. So it's I kind of like went off into like a certain direction and got lost out there.
No, that's okay. No, that's really interesting. Yeah. I mean, just in that, and bully is not even a big word, but look at how much information you can see just within that one word in terms of what is actually happening. Like with Destiny, we work with the living word. So we look at words and what is actually existing in this word, and that's great. You found some really interesting stuff that really sheds light into what's actually going on behind the bully. Obviously, we see bullies in terms of, within Destiny, you can see, in terms of those of us that have walked the process, we can kind of see that the bully is kind of, puffing themselves up a little bit and putting on this kind of act, but we want to know why, like what is behind that. So, Garb, do you want to share with us your experience with being in that position of being a bully, and kind of like just your experience in general? What have you seen within yourself when you found yourself in that position?
Sure. So I'm more related to being a bully when I was younger. Like I remember like 6 years old to like say 10 years old. And in our neighborhood, I had a group of kids that I always played with, my neighborhood kids. And presented myself in this position basically because I saw within the group that I was I had this skill. Well, we always used to play sports and like outside things, and I was always able to compete with everybody and like be right on the level of, you know, be. I use that within myself to kind of show that, you know, I am a superior person to you guys because I can keep up with you. Most of them were boys, so you know, I had that level of like superiority, and so through that I kind of started to bully like the younger kids that were there. I mean, we were ages like I was the one of the older ones, so like 10 to like probably 5, bunch of kids playing, and you know, kind of not totally being mean to them, but kind of directing everyone and, you know, how we're gonna do things, and, you know, being the leader, but also at times being, you know, mean and making fun of people and making people feel bad and things like that. So I kind of used it in a way to stay in this position of being the best, because through that I got like an ego boost, as we say, or you know, I felt good about myself compared to other kids. And yeah, so I just kind of used it in a way to, you know, stay on top and, you know, stay, you know, being able to kind of do what I want.
Yeah, I can relate to that also. I saw bullying behavior within myself when I was younger, and specifically with my cousin, actually. She was 6 months younger than me, so I was technically the older cousin. But we spent a lot of time together, and we basically grew up like sisters. And I remember I always had this experience of being inferior to her, and she was like the boss. And it was kind of like if I wanted to, you know, when I would go and hang out with her at her house, and this is, yeah, but probably before the age of 10. If I went to her house, if I wanted a snack or if I wanted to play with something, I felt within myself that I had to ask permission, which is really interesting because I haven't yet really looked at where that came from, but it kind of just, it was how it was in terms of our relationship. Like, I felt like I had to ask permission and get her okay, and she kind of was the boss. And within myself, I felt really inferior and like weakened and diminished, and it was uncomfortable because in that I did feel like she was a bully. You know, it was like this fear of her, you know, and I was like, I wanted to make sure that, you know, I didn't, you know, bother her or upset her in any way because I don't know, it was like I was afraid she would lash out at me. But there was this one moment where we were outside at her house, and I was riding her bike, and I stood up with the bike, and I was still, you know, holding onto the handlebars, and she said, you know, I'm ready for my bike, I want it back, and I wasn't ready to give it up. And she like took the handlebars and pulled it towards her, and she was like, I'm ready for my bike, and I'm like, no. And within myself, it was like that moment of all of a sudden I was like, no, I'm not ready to give up this bike. And it was like the roles reversed. All of a sudden I felt like I was the boss. I had the control in that moment. Like, I wasn't going to let her tell me what to do. And it was almost like, like you said, there was like this ego boost within me because all of a sudden I felt like I had the power, because she then, you know, you could tell she went into that experience of she was upset with me, and she called to her mom like, she's not, you know, giving my bike back. And I felt powerful because I saw within her the experience that I had where I felt like she was the one in control, and now all of a sudden I was in control, and I was like, yeah, like I'm the strong one, and I'm not, you know, gonna let you tell me what to do. And it's interesting because I like embraced that experience. Like, I wanted to tell her what to do and kind of be the boss of her and kind of bully her a little bit because I felt like she was doing that to me all along. And you know, the thing is, that was just an experience within myself. It wasn't actually like, you know, who knows, I haven't really communicated to her about it now, but I can't see that she was deliberately trying to bully me. It was just an experience I had within myself in relation to her. So that kind of brings up the point of children and how these things kind of come up within ourselves, and we don't really have the understanding or the tools to work through them. You know, this type of understanding and looking at our minds doesn't really exist, you know. And so maybe, Josh, you can enlighten us a little bit about that point in terms of where are the parents, what is the parents' role in you know, dealing with children who have these experiences that they're being bullied, and how that can, it's like we can kind of see that if someone feels like they're diminished, like my experience, I felt diminished, and then all of a sudden I had a position to become the powerful one to diminish another, I took the opportunity. So where do you see the family or the parents' role in terms of looking at children's behavior and helping them to work through certain feelings where they might feel diminished or inferior, and then want to take an opportunity where they can project that onto other people?
Okay, well, within your question, so it kind of came up, like it occurred to me that there's maybe like a cycle of bullying, where you're cycling between a positive and negative experience, and so the child that's a bully probably has that experience that you described, that you had, that inferior or diminished experience within themselves in relationship to their own parents, or siblings. It could just be siblings as well. And then when they're at school, they'll find somebody who appears weaker, and they'll project that out, the bully character out towards those that appear weaker, and then they'll get an ego boost, so they'll feel better. Their starting point, though, of course, is inferiority, so they actually have a fear point that's already operating, that's driving them to become the bully in the first place. And the fear point is that they're in fearing themselves, fearing that they're inferior or less than. That's coming from the relationship probably at home, And so going back to the relationship at home, just one thing that I've realized as a parent, and it's actually kind of recent, maybe within the last 6 months to a year, is the tendency for parents to be reactive to their kids. And it's extremely easy to fall into a reaction with your children because I don't have a better way to explain it, but there's two points on it, really. One is children tend to act in ways that are surprising to the adult, to an adult, and the adult has more of a what the F moment, like how could this, how could you be doing this, maybe a kid walking, just got done playing in the mud, and he runs inside the house with his muddy shoes just clogged with mud, and it just gets all through the house, and your first reaction is like, what the, what the F, it's just like this, you get instantly mind possessed, like, how could you do this? And it just comes out exactly like I said, like, how could that happen? And you're freaking out, and that is very intimidating to the child, and you're basically just being a bully right off the bat. And even if you apologize and make up for it, you still left kind of like an imprint on the child. And so now the child's going to go ahead and repeat that somewhere else. So that would be one point that parents need to, to work on to help prevent their own kids from being bullies, is to really watch your reactions around them and try to simply just take a step back. And it's almost like, for me, I just have to remind myself that there's probably a reaction coming. Like, I can kind of see it in advance now. Like if my son just walked through the house with muddy shoes, like in that moment, I would already know that I'm gonna react. So I'll instantly just shut it down and just breathe through it and try not to say anything until I'm a little bit more stable and clear, and then address the situation as calmly as possible. And the other point of bullying, it would be in the realm of discipline, and that would be, kids are they're not robots. You don't just program them and they go to bed at 9 o'clock or whatever your bedtime is. You have to have a structure in place, and you have to get them to follow the structure. Otherwise, they would stay up all night, and you'd have consequences to deal with. So, and it's easy to fall into a bullying state when you're just trying to get them to, to go to bed or do basic things. So, again, that would be something where you'd have to learn how to slow down a bit. Like, for instance, my partner would just tell me about tonight about how when she was younger, her father would jump on her about, like, not breaking down the milk cartons, before she put them in the garbage can, and it, you know, made her feel bad about herself. And then so she actually went into this wanting to prove herself kind of point to her father, and you know, it's just over something like that, which had nothing to do with her personally. It was just his way of dealing with it was, you know, more of like, I guess, in a bully kind of situation where she felt, you know, beat down by it. So those are the things to look for.
Yeah, that's a really cool point too, because that shows that like people are not born bullies, you know. It's a
Right.
learned behavior, and there is, you know, a point within them where it started, or a moment in their life where it was kind of like the seed was planted. And so, you know, from that perspective, it's cool because it's a behavior that can be unlearned or changed or looked at why it happens, and we'll talk a little bit about that shortly in terms of, you know, tools that we have that we can utilize to change, you know, the bullying behavior. But I'm going to go back to Garb here, and you kind of found yourself in the shoes of, you know, you had some bullying tendencies as a kid, and then you found yourself being bullied. So that's kind of interesting, you know. So can you share a little bit about that experience and what you know, what did you see within that in terms of, you know, you're in both roles in that
Yeah.
whole construct, so can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so I started off my life basically being, you know, I am top, I'm the best, I'm, you know, everybody must think I'm cool, and you know, I am cool, and all like the good positive thoughts about myself. And then at some stage in my life, it switched where then I was actually bullied by kids in school, and I was, you know, I was eventually outcasted from my friends, and you know, I was more, you know, on the outskirts of peer groups, and um, you know, within that, I basically saw the other spectrum of, you know, being a bully, but then what it's like to be bullied. And you know, as you bully people, you don't consider the fact that, you know, what effect that has on people and how damaging it is psychologically, and you know, and physically. It can go into physical abuse too, I'm sure. I was never physically abused, but mentally, yeah. And you know, it really, you know, it created a whole mind point in myself where, you know, I started looking at myself and seeing, you know, what's wrong with me, why am I being bullied, and finding things about me that's, you know, wrong and bad and not good enough. And so that cycled into, you know, trying to be this person that I really wasn't, but you know, I wanted to do whatever I had to do to be accepted by people, and you know, kind of lose myself within that. And yeah, the interesting thing was to see the other side of it and how damaging it is to be a bully, because you know, the person that is bullying is also damaged within themselves too. I mean, really, where that cycle is just very abusive. And you know, you can see in your own life, I'm sure everybody can see when they are a bully and when they're being bullied by someone. And you know, when you're being bullied by someone, you want to then take that out on someone else that's weaker, and it's just a vicious cycle that happens. And yeah, so it's yeah, like a cycle.
Yeah, that's a really that point that you mentioned in terms of you don't really consider maybe how the other person experienced themselves. You know, I later in high school, I had two moments where I could classify myself as a bully, where I did something deliberately. Um, well, maybe it wasn't deliberately to harm another person, but I was acting in a point of self-interest. Like I had this girl that I was really close with in school, and then there was these other girls that I defined as better and more cool, and I wanted to hang out with them. And we created this actual situation where they said, you can be friends with us, but you have to ditch the other girl. And I was totally willing to do that for my own self-image and self-interest and wanting to be accepted by these people that I thought was better. So I actually, you know, I went to this girl, and it was like this whole dramatic scene, like I'm not going to be friends with you, and I like ran away from her, and I was like, don't talk to me ever again. And you know, I've written some vlogs on this, and it was interesting because it's like, you know, if I put myself in her shoes at that age, you know, and what we kind of face in school in terms of the social and hierarchy kind of structures that exist within school, who knows what that moment for her created, you know, because it's been 20 years and I'm looking at this point and it still comes up within me in terms of, or, you know, when I started writing about this, there was a point of regret and guilt, and I felt bad for doing that to her. And that's, you know, 20 years later, you know, what is that point for her now in her life? You know, it's like considering what that moment was for her and how did that kind of create who she's become. And, you know, not saying that, you know, maybe it didn't have an impact like I thought it did, but, you know, it's kind of that point of putting yourself in the shoes of another and treating other people the way that you want to be treated, because you don't know, you know, how other people internalize things, and you don't know what kind of damage you can cause. And, you know, it's just that point of taking care and responsibility of not only yourself in terms of making sure you're not acting out a point of your own inferiority, you know, but taking care of other people too, and making sure you're treating people the way that they should be treated, that you would want to be treated. You know, it's that point of valuing life equally. And so that, you know, that's really interesting in terms of being a bully. You know, you really have to look at what are your actions, what kind of impact does your actions have, you know, and yeah, so
and then also it's you don't have to intentionally be a bully. I mean, you could be a bully and not even know you're being a bully. And just, I think everybody knows that too, but I think that's important to point out.
right.
Like your parents could be just simply correcting, or your parents could be simply correcting their child, and being a bully about it, but not realizing that they're actually being a bully about it. And then the child can might actually become an actual bully on purpose.
Yeah.
But you know, and that came from their parents, and they didn't realize they were being bullies. You see, so I mean, it's just I just think that's an interesting part too.
And it's really easy for us to kind of like isolate the bully character in terms of, you know, we see the one bully in the group and it's like, that's the black sheep, that's the bad person, there's the bully, you know, but it's like, if we really look at it, you know, like I said, I didn't physically do any harm to this girl, you know, in terms of like abusing her, but I put her in a compromising position because I defined her as inferior, and me wanting to be superior, you know, I diminished her and I basically said, you're not worth it for me to be around. Like, that can be classified as a bully, you know? So it's interesting that we want to say a bully is this specific point and that's what it looks like, but really it exists in very subtle forms, and you can say it exists kind of like just as our nature, you know?
Yeah. It's not just like Biff on Back to the Future and Marty McFly, like, that's the bully, right?
Yeah.
Rather than just that.
Yeah.
It's also to realize that if you look at the thoughts inside your head, how much you're bullying yourself, like every couple minutes probably you're saying something about yourself. You're either stupid or you don't look good enough, or you're, you know, and it's all based on like a fear of, you know, not being who you have in your head that you want to be. So
right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you can say comparing yourself to another person is a form of bullying. You know, it's like you're bullying yourself when you say, I don't look or act or express myself as good as that person, I have to be better. And then you like force yourself to do certain things based on this, you know, point of comparison. That is, you know, being a self-bully.
yeah.
So in terms of like how people can start changing these points within themselves, if they've seen that they're a bully, either to other people or to themselves, you know, what can they do to really kind of, you know, take on this point of the bully within themselves? Do you guys want to share, you know, anything that you walked through or what tools you've applied specifically?
Did you want to go?
No, you can go.
Right. Well, I mean, as a parent, in that one application, that's something I personally really learned to do, is to not be reactive towards my kids. It still happens every now and then, but I'm much more aware of it, and I simply try to only communicate when I'm stable, or more stable than in the moment of reaction. And then if you take that and you just, as an adult, because a lot of adults can be bullies to other adults, or to people, and not even realize they're being a bully or acting within that character. So to stop that, the best thing you can do is to just try to slow down, in your communications, especially at those points where you have a reaction of any type of, like if you're surprised or angered or upset, or if you have any type of fear, or point that arises that kind of grips you. Just it's best to just try to slow down before you actually speak, so that when you do speak, it's something that's a little bit more on equal terms. So just that's one point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Garb, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. So from my perspective with bullying, or being bullied and being the bully, I've walked an extensive process with it, because it evolved into a lot of self-judgment points within myself, and suppression within myself. So I've been focusing on this point, and I've really focused on different thoughts and memories, and really the writing of taking it day by day. We're all doing the Journey to Life blog, so just writing each point that comes up, and really seeing actually this bullied and bully point as like a gift, because I really got an interesting perspective in having both sides, like living both sides to the extreme, really. And realizing that it's all actually within myself, and I've like done this to myself, really. It's a lot of different desires that I want. I want to be like this beautiful person, say, or I want to be the best at whatever I'm doing, and not realizing that putting that expectation there, you're gonna cause disappointment, because you can't live that out every time. So just looking at the different constructs like comparison and self-judgment and desires and fears that come up, and writing that out through the self-forgiveness and the self-commitments, and then just living that out, and just keep cycling it and keep walking it, and eventually progress and see more, and more things open up. So just walking the Desteni I process, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, from my perspective, it's just a matter of taking responsibility. Like, for me, I saw clearly certain moments where I acted out this bully character, and, years and years later, I can clearly see that that behavior was unacceptable. And it was based within a starting point of how I felt about myself, wanting acceptance from other people and wanting other people's approval. That behavior was for the eyes of other people, and what does that say about how I, saw myself? Because I was more worried about what I thought other people thought of me, or wanting other people to accept me, that I wasn't realizing that I wasn't accepting myself, So it's like, even in that, when we are not, valuing the relationship that we have with ourselves in terms of how do we see ourselves, how do we experience ourselves, who are we as our thoughts and our words and our deeds, and really looking at who am I, when we don't do that, we create destructive behavior such as bullying, because we're not paying attention to ourselves. It's almost like this discord happens within ourselves, and this, this kind of this experience where we just want to lash out at other people because we're not giving ourselves the attention that we really actually need and require to create a version of ourselves that is actually supportive to not only ourselves but to other people.
Yeah.
Do you guys have anything to say?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, yeah, it's not gonna be something that's an easy process to walk, because we've really actually never done this for ourselves, given us the time to, see where we're not living in a nice way, or a good way, and figuring out what that's going to take to change, so I can take responsibility for myself and make sure that I'm not abusing other people and not abusing myself. And yeah,
Absolutely. And it is that point also, if, for people that have seen that they have bullied people in the past, and they have that experience of like guilt or regret, like I experienced, that's where self-forgiveness comes in. Like, you can, obviously you're going to have to be the one to forgive yourself for, acting in ways that you see are clearly unacceptable or abusive, that don't really reflect who you really are. There is self-forgiveness, which, you know, um, we have, the DIP Lite course, and the DIP Pro course, and we have the forums, and we have the Journey to Lifers who write about, how they use, or they share their writings on how they use self-forgiveness, and so you can learn through the DIP Lite course how to apply self-forgiveness for not only, this point of letting go of the past and who you have been, but also in how you're not allowing yourself to live the best way you can now. So we have courses, and we have forum, and we have a ton of support from other people walking this exact process of changing themselves. So of course we'll share the links for that. But I have a flood of comments from our friend Gabriel, so I'm just going to read these here quick. He starts with saying, from my personal experience, what I found is that I personally accepted the abuse being done from the bully in order to be able to play the victim. And when I look at my own thoughts of inferiority, I saw that I was continuously playing such role within me. I also saw that the bully also is looking for a point of acceptance and recognition within him or herself, and the fact is that we search for recognition and attention outside of ourselves because we feel within us that we are not enough. So actually what was driving me to accept my own thoughts of inferiority was the same point that was driving the bully to seek for recognition from others. And I realized that the very point of recognition means to refer to a point of belong to somewhere. This sense of belonging implies that the people don't actually feel that they belong anywhere. They don't feel part of the world of this life, and we are searching for this value and recognition outside of ourselves. Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. It's like, again, that point of, you're not recognizing yourself and your value and your worth and and I can see how that would create just a rift within oneself. And because we're not taught how to process that or to understand it or to even change it, we can easily then, like I said, lash out at other people and kind of take out our experience on other people. Do you guys have anything to add to what he said?
Yeah, that's interesting. He brought that up. I was thinking about in the beginning of our chat, we were talking about the definition of the sounding of the words, and it came out, the inferiority superiority point came up during that point, and that in order to release yourself from the bully character, you really need to face your inferiority. Like, I guess that's what Gabriel's saying, right? Like your points of inferiority, like that's what's driving the desire to act within the bully character. So that would be a good place to start. The inferiority points and the superiority points. Release both polarities, through self-forgiveness.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, well said. Thank you, Gabriel.
Another point, my buddy actually just said to me the other day, we were working on another point, me and my partner, and she's like, you two are, because we're going back and forth about different things that are happening, and she's like, well, you two are really just two physical bodies in this physical existence, and that's it. Like, we're here, we're like in the same environment, and so it's not about like, who's who and who's better or who's doing this better. It's more just like, we're here, we're human beings, and that's it really. I mean, that's the bottom line.
Absolutely. It's like taking the power play and the power games, taking the ego out of life, really. And that's what we do within the Destiny process. So, yeah, I think that's great. Do you guys have any last words? I think that, we've summed this up quite nicely.
Yeah, it's a good chat.
I'm good.
Good. Okay, cool. Well, thank you guys for joining me in the last hangout in the bullying series. Again, for those watching, if you can relate to anything that we've shared or have been intrigued at all in terms of what we do within Destiny and walking our process and want to learn more about self-forgiveness and writing and self-honesty and how to change or correct your behavior, investigate the Destiny I Process Lite course. It's free and it gives you a really nice introduction to these tools that we've been talking about here tonight. So thanks again, you guys, for joining me. Thanks for watching. Next week, Anna will be back with Cerise for another installment of the Relationship Success Support Series, so check that out. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and thank you guys for watching. We'll see you next time.